After building out my very own self-hosted cloud, image backup servers, media servers, and much more, a critical component is actually connecting to my home lab, home server, from anywhere in the world with the same power and control as if I was sitting here right next to it. I could just open ports, but for critical things like my image server or any other services that are housing like really important data, that's not really something that I want to do. Now, recently, Netbird reached out to me to check out their software, and no, this is not a sponsored video, but I do have direct communication with them, and there is maybe some potential of contract work in the future, so there is definitely going to be a bias there. And they're a company based out of Berlin, which is awesome. So many great open source projects end up coming out of Berlin. I've even been there a few times covering Nextcloud events, and oh boy am I excited to go back. But probably the big thing for me with it is a majority of everything is completely open source and it's completely self-hostable, including the controllers, even the management software, all that. And that is opposed to TwinGate, which isn't completely open sourced. And if you watch the channel, you know that's what I've been using for quite a while, but ever since trying out Netbird, it is definitely my go-to solution going forward. Now I am getting a little ahead of myself. What is Netbird? Netbird is an overlay VPN designed to make secure peer-to-peer connectivity across devices, servers, networks, cloud environments super easy to use and set up. This isn't like Nord, PIA, or AirVPN that rely on centralized servers. While those are great for if you are torrenting an Ubuntu ISO trying to hide your IP address, or if you're switching your kind of virtual location to access some other country's services, those are great use cases for that. But this is for secure connections to your infrastructure, whether that be an office server or even connecting like your mobile phone directly to your desktop computer. Netbird uses WireGuard's lightweight encryption to establish direct encrypted tunnels between devices or peers automatically. It eliminates manual configuration by handling tasks like IP assignment, NAT transversal, and connection negotiation through built-in signaling services via agents exchanging connection candidates, IPs and ports, to ping each other and allow you to work through basically any firewall. Plus, you can set up a various amount of single sign-on providers and multi-factor authentication for added security. This in addition to DNS management and full access control. There are generally two ways to going about setting this up, and the first one is a full peer-to-peer mesh network. For this, what you do is you install Netbird on every device that you want to have connectivity, and then you could connect those peers directly to each other, creating the mesh network. You could do this with a bunch of devices on your home network, or even remote devices can have that direct connectivity to each other. Another option is remote network access with Netbird networks, because sometimes it's not actually feasible to install a Netbird peer on every single device, kind of like printers, IoT devices, so on. In this case, you could set it up as a Netbird enabled connector on something like a Raspberry Pi, Proxmox, really whatever you'd like. And then this will act as a bridge, allowing other devices in the network to securely access devices on your network that you allow it to, whether that be individual devices or your entire subnet. In the middle of the diagram here, we can see the coordination server is on the internet. Now, this is optional because if I wanted to, I could actually self-host that coordination server directly on my local machine, including all the management stuff, all that. Both the cloud and the self-hosted version include the core functionalities of the software: identity provider integration, multi-factor authentication, access control networks, and more. But real quick, I'll talk about some of the benefits of just doing it through them directly. So this right here is their website, and if I head over to pricing, we can see the free tier, so you can use their cloud completely for free for up to 5 users and 100 machines. And then if you want to start utilizing some of their business features, it will be $5 per user a month, in which you could have unlimited users at that rate. And then they have a business plan with even more features. For their paid business features, a big standout is provisioning users and groups from an identity provider, such as Google or Azure. This basically syncs users and groups from your identity provider into Netbird, automatically granting appropriate network access to specific users and groups, and immediately revoking access if an employee happens to be departing. Also, traffic event logging is a big one if you're giving a bunch of different people access to critical network infrastructure. And then there's features such as EDR integrations, peer approvals to join a network, user invites, event streaming to third-party platforms, and MSP DSP functionality for managing multiple tenant networks from a single account. Using their cloud platform basically has no maintenance effort, which makes it incredibly convenient if you're just like an individual or a small group on their free plan, or if you're managing like a larger business organization on their business plan. However, I do absolutely love that they have the option to self-host this, but for me personally, I'm probably just going to use their cloud free tier because personally, when it comes to security stuff like this, I trust them a little bit more than myself to manage this. But regardless, at the end of this video, we're going to go into kind of a little demo and setup of the self-hosted instance just to check it out. So from there, I'm going to dive onto the machine and just kind of go through the whole process of setting everything up from scratch. I've deleted everything, cleared my networks, so you can kind of see the entire process of everything. All right, so what I'm going to do first, of course, is create an account here. So I'm just going to click on Get Started. Here we have a few options. I'm going to just link this up to my GitHub. And then just like that, we are in. So the very first thing that we're going to do is generate a setup key. So if we head over here, this is where we could go ahead and do that. So let's create a setup key. This one, you can call it whatever you want. I'm just going to call this one first setup. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to make this key reusable because I'm going to use it on 3 different machines. So I'm going to set a usage limit to 3. We have a days expired. We have some security stuff here. So if a peer is offline for more than 5 minutes, it just will completely remove it. And we have extra DNS labels, which I'm going to leave off for now. And we have groups here, but we're going to dive into that a lot more a little bit later. So I'm just going to go ahead and click on Create Setup Key. So here is my key. I'm just going to give that a copy. And if I go ahead and click Install Netbird, here we have a bunch of different options to get it installed. So on Linux, we just simply run a single line command. It launches a script to install everything for us. On Windows, they have an installer, same with Mac, and then they have options for Docker. I'm going to be showing you both Linux and Docker real quick. The first peer that I want to set up is going to be Proxmox, and you could install this either in an LXC, VM, or just directly on host, which is what I'm going to do. So I'm going to select my node right here and then go to the shell. And then to install it, we just paste in that single curl command, which will pull the setup script. So we could hit enter, and then it's going to go ahead and install it for us, as well as adding the repository and all that, of course. And just like that, it's done. You can see it's been started, it's running, it's linked up with systemctl. And before I connect, if we go over here, we could see peers. Currently, there are no peers. But if I head back over to Proxmox and I just run the command netbird up-k for our setup key, and then drop it on in there, hit enter, boom, it's connected just like that. And we will immediately see the peers. If we go over here, give this a quick little refresh, you can see we have our peer right here. So then I could customize this a little bit if I wanted to. I could open it up. We could see a lot of information. So we have the netbird IP address, which we could use that for direct peer-to-peer connection. You can use domain names. So the default is netbird.cloud. That's another thing you could change if you'd like to. And of course, a lot of other system information groups. You can enable SSH access here if you would like to. And I don't really like NAS sync 1. I need to change that on my end through Proxmox, but I'm just going to call this PVE, Proxmox Virtual Environment. So now in peers, you could see right there, we got our little PVE peer set up. Now I do want to set up another peer. This one is going to be on a little Raspberry Pi. That Pi manages, well, it's going to manage our VPN connections. It also manages my network infrastructure. So Omada is installed on there, as well as DDNS. So right here, I already SSH'd into this machine. You can see it's the Raspberry Pi 5. This I'm going to set up with Docker. So this machine, I just have running a single compose stack for everything. Through the setup, there's a simple Docker command that you can use, but I personally prefer to set everything up in compose. And I already kind of threw that in here. You have my Omada controller, and then we have netbird. It's currently commented out. So I will undo these comments real quick. So for Docker, we just give it a container name. We give it our host name, which is going to be netbird pi. We cap add, so we give it access to network, system, and system resources. It's going to be the host, or have access to the network host. Privileged is going to be true. And then under environment, we have a place to put our setup key. And of course, we do have a volume for the client there and the image. So all we really need to do is pop in our new setup key. Additionally, down here on the bottom, we're going to add the volumes for the netbird client. And then we go to output that, close out, and now I should just be able to do a Docker compose up-d, and you can see it's now pulling netbird, creating those volumes, and everything's fired up. And we could check that by going to Docker logs netbird pi, and we don't have any errors, so we should be good to go. If I go back over here to our peers, refresh that. Well, yeah, look at that. We have Netbird Pi set up now as a peer. And theoretically, they're in a peer-to-peer mesh network. So if I copy this PVE right here, or the IP address for the PVE peer, and then just do a simple ping of that server, it has a connection. And even though these two machines are local, it is a secure tunneled connection with WireGuard. And now what we want to do is talk about networks and routing. So what we're going to do is head over here to networks, and we're going to add a network. This is going to be my home network here. So we'll just call it that, home network, and then click add network. Now here it's giving us the option to add resources, and we're going to go ahead and do that. So I'm going to add a resource, and for our very first resource, I am just going to call this our network subnet, and then we're going to give it the subnet IP address of 10.0.0.0. Obviously change this if yours is a little bit different, -24, and then we have destination groups here. Now again, I'm going to dive more into that in just a bit, but I might as well add it to a group. And I can call this, like, this is the subnet group. So add subnet, hit enter, and now we can click on add resource. And it's giving us the option to add a policy, but I am going to do that a little bit later. So in this network, we need to add a routing peer. This again will route traffic from this Netbird peer to other devices on our network, allowing us to remote into the peer and then connect to other machines and other devices or other services that we're running, such as like Image, Nextcloud, MB, whatever it may be. And since we added the subnet, we're going to be able to do that with our local IP addresses. So right here, I'm just going to click on add routing peer. And here we have two options. We could either do routing peers or a peer group. So in peers, you can assign various devices to a group. You can create a routing peer group and do it that way, but I'm just going to add the devices individually real quick. So we're going to do our Netbird Pi as one of them and then hit continue. We're going to enable as a routing peer, and we're going to allow access to our private networks without configuring routes on our network or other devices. And then we have our metrics here, which this is a priority number. So the lower the number, the higher priority that routing peer will have. But let's just go ahead and click on add routing peer. So just like that, you could see the network is now online and accessible. I do have one peer. It says the high availability is currently inactive. And that's another thing that we might as well just do real quick. Let's say this Raspberry Pi for some reason gets unplugged, it goes down. Set up like this, my home network would no longer be accessible, so you're going to want to put additional routing peers into this network, so if one goes down, another one can take over. And to do that, we just simply add another routing peer. In this case, I'm going to go with our Proxmox server, continue, and let's say theoretically I wanted the Proxmox server to have higher priority. We could just change this to a lower number here, and then click on add routing peer. And just like that, you can see this turns green, and now high availability is now active. Now, in the most basic sense, this is set up and ready to go, so we might as well go ahead and test it. So here, I'm just going to grab this Netbird app real fast and disconnect from our Wi-Fi so we're no longer on that same network, and open it up, allow VPN configurations. When I go ahead and click on this to connect, it will prompt us with a login, so I'm going to log into the same account. It's the default account, so it's the main admin account. Hit done, and we should connect, and we should see the peers available when the connection is complete. So there we go, we're connected. We have 2 peers available. So just as an example, if I connect directly to the Netbird IP address, so I'll pop that in and then go to my Proxmox port, just like that, you can see it is working. So if we visit this website, that's just an SSL error. We can log into Proxmox, and I'm not connected to my local network. Now, real quick, I actually do want to add a policy real fast to this subnet. So if I go ahead and add a policy, I'm going to select the group all. Just for now, we will change this a little bit later to make it more secure. But if I add all, which my admin user is a part of, we'll continue and add that policy. We should be able to connect to the local IP address now. So you can see 10.0.0.81.80.06. Let's go to that. And you can see it works. We're prompted to log in. Now, because the whole subnet is open, we can access everything on this network. So if I go to my media server and then go to the MB port here, boop, on HTTP, you can see we have access to MB now. So we have a base setup. If all you want to do is spin up a peer and access your network as a single user, as the admin, we're good to go. But real quick, I want to go over one of my favorite use cases, and that is the peer-to-peer connections, especially connecting offsite machines to my local machines here. An example of that I have is I have a In a different offsite location, I have an instance of Proxmox backup server. So here I connected to the Synology machine just using the Synology Quick Connect. Quick Connect is super slow. It sucks. I'm not going to do it now, but spinning up a Netbird peer on Synology is really easy. It's the exact same process with that single command, except for you do need to set up a little script that will make sure that Netbird is running if your Synology NAS restarts. But I'm just going to open up my virtual machine manager here, and we can see that we have Proxmox backup server running here. I'm just going to connect to it real quick. And you can see I was testing this earlier, so I already have the package installed, but we need to reconnect to it with that new setup key. So netbird up -K, and unfortunately I can't copy and paste it in here. 5B62. There we go. So just like that, it should go ahead and go. I could cry. Oh, the last two numbers got me. 62. Enter. Connected! Yay! So now if I head over here, go to peers, we should have the very new Proxmox backup server. Now, since that machine is off-site, I am quickly going to download this for the desktop I'm on, run the quick installation wizard, and there we go, Netbird's installed. So I'm going to close this out, move it, and then right up here we got Netbird. So let's go ahead and click on connect and login successful. So now I should just be able to grab this IP address right here for Proxmox backup server, and then we can travel to it at the port 8007. I believe this is going to want HTTPS. Hey, will you look at that? Absolutely beautiful. And boom, we're in. So real quick, I'm going to add this data store. Do note, this isn't a Proxmox backup server type dedicated video. I will probably make that if you're interested. Do subscribe. So we got our remote PVE here, and we have the actual Netbird peer installed both on this offsite backup server and locally on my Proxmox instance. Let's head over to data center and then storage, add a new one. We're going to add a Proxmox backup server. I'm just going to call it remote. And for the server, again, I am just going to copy that Netbird IP address there, drop it on in, fill in all of our credentials. Over on the backup server, let's go dashboard, show the fingerprint, give that a copy, drop it in right there. That's actually a PAM, and click add, and boom, there we go. We now have our remote Proxmox backup server right here. Connection successful, so now I will have secure, safe, offsite backup. Direct peer-to-peer connection like this is relatively easy to set up. It's when you get into setting up like clients, desktop mobile applications, and those are going to require specific like policies, networks, and things like that. So now we are done with Proxmox and our peer-to-peer connections. You could also see here it added my iPhone as a client, which is pretty cool. But one thing I want to touch on, which is super cool, is going to be some of the DNS stuff. Now, there is a lot that you could do with this. I highly recommend you check out their documentation. It goes over some of the core concepts such as the local name resolver, name servers, match domains, as well as a whole bunch of examples. But for my little example here, what I'm going to do is use my existing Pi-hole instance and use that as the DNS server on my Netbird networks. This is Pi-hole. If you don't know what it is, I'm not going to get too far into it. It's a DNS sinkhole that allows you to set up ad blocking and some other features such as local DNS. So if I go over here, you can see I have a couple records. So I could use these domains instead of IP addresses if I would like to. But over here on Netbird, name servers, I'm just going to add a name server here. You have options, so you could set up custom Google, Cloudflare, a bunch of different options, including custom, which we're going to do. And the actual name server that I'm going to be using is 103. That's the instance that I have Pi-hole installed on. For the groups, for now, I'm just going to go with all and subnet. And then from there, we have match domains, which I'm not going to play with right now. Again, do check out the documentation. And this is going to be my Pi-hole DNS. So we're going to add that name server, and just like that, this is now acting as our DNS for Pi-hole. And you can see down here under the top permitted domains, I have stun netbird, turn netbird. I have been testing this. So you can see it is working as our DNS server. And another kind of cool thing is earlier I pointed out the DNS records. So for example, you could see here I am on MB using the media.lan. So you can use locally hosted domain names or local DNS domains instead of having to completely rely on either IP addresses or even over here some of the Netbird DNS stuff, which we can see right here. So now we're going to get into users, groups, and access. Let's say theoretically you have somebody, whether that be like a coworker or a family member, that you want to be able to connect to your network and access specific services without having like full subnet access like we set up earlier. That is very, very doable. And most of the stuff is going to be managed here in the access controls. You can see that subnet policy that we already created. All sources have access to the subnet. And the default, which is currently enabled, all is access to all. When you start adding more people, you are going to want to disable this default policy and then customize your policies specific for whatever it is that you're trying to do. So since I disabled that policy, I probably am going to start having a couple issues. So for example, here you can see my remote instance on Proxmox. It's having some issues. It lost that connection because it's no longer running the all policy. Communication error. And to fix that, for example, I'd head over to my peers and I would assign these some groups. So for Proxmox backup server, I could create a group specifically for this task if I want to, just as an example. So I can make a group called remote sync, add this to that remote sync group, save it, and then let's make a group for our local PvE server, and we could call this something like trusted. Obviously, you could call all these what you want, depending on how you want to organize it and configure it. But we'll set this as a trusted group. I'm going to save the group. And then if I go under the policies here, we're going to go ahead and add a new policy. And I want the trusted groups or the trusted peers that are assigned this group to have access to remote sync. Right now it's set to all ports. We're going to dive into that for the next example, but I'm going to continue here. We're not going to enable posture checks at the moment, but this is actually pretty cool. I'll just start the free trial. It's real nice that they don't make you like pop in a credit card anything right away, so you could test it without having to do all that. But if I add a posture check, I can set it so it has to be like a specific country or region, a specific operating system, and that could get down to whether if it's like mobile only or desktop only. You get all the way down to running as a specific like process on a machine. But for example, if I wanted to go country region, I could add a location, and for example, let's just go to Antarctica. If I wanted to block anything coming in from Antarctica, I could do that, and you could get to specific locations, but there's probably not a lot going to show up under that. So if I save that, continue. For the name of the posture check, I could say something like no penguins allowed for this policy. So we'll create that posture check. Here we go. So continue, and this is going to be our remote sync policy. So we'll add that policy, and there it is. We can see now all trusted machines can have access to remote sync. And if I go over here and let's kind of refresh this, let it think about it again. Look at that, it's working. I'm not getting that connection error anymore. So here, this is my admin kind of user. So I'm actually going to make a new group and I'm going to call it admin. So boom, save changes. And now if I head back over to our access control policies, for this subnet network, I want all instead of all. We're going to go with I want admins, just like that, to have access to the subnet. So if I click save, and I just verified that that policy works real quick, so we're good to go. So now let's add another user with a completely different group. Now, I'm going to invite a user, and this is going to be my wife. This is my official final setup, so I'm actually going to do it properly. Popped in her email. We do have some default user types here. I'm just going to make her a user and auto assign groups. This right here, I'm going to make a new one. I'm just going to call it family. So if I invite anybody else that happens to be a family member, I could put them in the family group, and then I could set up policies so that family group has access to specific resource ports and so on. So we'll add that, send the invitation, and now I actually have to go have her accept it. So I'll be back. So I'm back. I explained to my wife what I was doing, and she just handed me her phone and told me to do it. Accepted the invite, signed her in, boom, accept that. There we go. Connected, but she is connected to no peers. So what I'm going to do is give her access to a very specific service. So what we can do is first let's go under networks into our home network, and we're going to add a new resource. Since she's not having access to the entire subnet, we need to add the actual machine specifically. So here, let's add a resource, and this one is going to be our media server. And for the IP, I'm just going to pop in our local IP address for that machine. And for the designated groups, I'm actually going to put this into a media group, because I have a couple other machines that function as kind of media type server devices. So I'll give them this group as well. So I will add that, add the resource, and now right here, I am going to add a new policy for this. For this, I am going to allow family to connect to the destination media, which is automatically filled out for us. But in this case, I want to give it port specific access. So I'm going to enable TCP here and pop in only the port for MB. That's going to be 8096. So add that port. And when I fully go through and set everything up, I'll add ports for like a overseer, image, and things like that. So we can continue. I'm not going to add any posture checks. And this can be the media server policy. So let's add that policy. And then there we go. We now have our media server with the IP address there. Oh, I do need to change this to 24. Save those changes. So we have the IP address. It's active groups media with the policy. So on her device here, what I will do is first try to navigate to something I know that there's no access to. And we'll even do it on the same machine for this example. So 200, and let's go 7878, which is another service I'm running on here. If I hit go, probably help if I disable Wi-Fi. So now when I try that, you can see it's stalling out, not working. She has no access. But according to my calculations, if she goes to the MB port we given her access to, hit go, will ya look at that. So now this user in the family group, because of our policy, the family group has access to media, which we can see here. So has access to that port, which is running the MB service. And you could get really specific with how things are set up. You could add a lot more groups and things. So for example, one thing I'd want to do is this Netbird Pi. I would want to set this up as a trusted machine, save that group. So now in the policies, I could modify this network subnet policy, for example, and I could just call it the admin policy and then go over here and source admin. I'll have access to both the subnet as well as our trusted devices here, remote sync, and I could play around with and configure that however I would like to. So save changes. And now you can see I have a admin policy with a bunch of destinations here. So now, like I said, I'm not actually going to run this with a self-hosted instance, but it's definitely worth checking out, seeing the installation process and how easy it is. So let's go ahead and test that out. So here we are. This is the self-hosting quick start guide. There are a few prerequisites. First, a machine powerful enough, 1 CPU and 2 gigs of memory. Numerous ports need to be accessible and a public domain. Now, for this case, I'm going to be doing this on a VPS because I don't want the failure point to be my internet at home. It's Xfinity, which is just wired cable. And if you've ever used Xfinity, you probably know it's not always Additionally, we are going to need Docker installed and a few packages. And this right here is our VPS. I'm already logged in. I've installed all the prerequisites, including Docker and a few packages. I've also went ahead and pointed a subdomain to the IP address of this VPS. And to run this, we're actually just going to be using a nice little script here. So I'm going to go ahead and give it a copy. We're going to make a new directory called Netbird, and I'm just going to drop that on in. Right at the start of the command, we are going to want to replace the Netbird domain with the one that we actually set up. So mine is hopkey.net, and then hit enter. This is going to do a lot of things, including pulling some Docker stuff, so it may take just a little bit of time. There we go. It's starting up Ztadel, which if you didn't notice is a free and open source identity provider that we are going to be using with this installation right here with Ztadel identity provider. So once this completely spins up, we could dive in, and there we go. And we do have some credentials right here that we can use to log in with our initial login. So let's just see if that's spun up ready to go for us. So here it is. It's first putting us in Ztadel. So let's go ahead and log in. So pop in our username and then our password. We could go next. And now we're going to set up two-factor. Now we can use an authentication app or a device-dependent one. I'm just going to do this with a authenticator app for now. Let's go next. Going to add that real quick and log in. Boom. 2 factors verified. So we could go ahead and go next. Type in a new password, making sure it is super strong and secure. And next. So there we go. Our password has been changed. Type in our authenticator code once again, and then dive on into the dashboard. It was really as simple as that. So we have no peers or anything set up, obviously. And if I go down to users, you can see I have the one Ztadel admin user. There's no option to invite users here. And to do that, you're actually going to need it to do it through the Ztadel dashboard. UI/console. And everything that you could do here is incredibly comprehensive. We're not going to have the time to cover all this in this video. But over here under users, this right here is my default user, and this is where you'd go ahead and add those new users. So for now, let's just go back to Netbird and check to see if we can set up a peer. So here under peers, actually, let's go setup keys and create our very first setup key. This is going to be our quick test key. I am only going to install this on one machine, so I'm going to have this one expire or not be usable after one. Going to check this just in case if my machine goes offline. And for groups, I'm just going to assign it to a VM group because that's what I'm going to install it on. And then we could create our setup key. Now for this, let's log into a local machine here. So I'm going to log into the VM that handles my Nextcloud instance, for example. And then I'm going to go back to the Netbird quick install guide and grab the little setup script here and just drop her on in. And it's installed, Netbird's up, but a key difference here is that we're going to need to connect this to our self-hosted instance as opposed to the cloud instance that's hosted by Netbird themselves. So now over here, I cleared out my console real quick. We're just going to do a Netbird up, and first we're going to change the management URL to our own instead of theirs. So we're going to go HTTPS, and then the domain I set, which is going to be netbird.hopkey.net. This is at 443, and we're going to set up our key. So if we do -K, and again, let's make sure I have this key copied, and then drop her on in there, and then when I hit enter, it is going to connect. You can see it's connected. Simple as that. So we should be able to see it here if we go under peers. Well, we can see that it has used that key. So if we go to peers here, there we are. It is our cloud VM. So we have a peer connected. We're good to go. Again, it's absolutely fantastic that this is an option, but for me personally, I'm going to stick with just having them do it in their cloud. So that was the self-hosted setup. Again, I'm just going to keep this current setup that I have here on the Netbird website. Overall, it's functioning really well. I like how easy it is to add peer-to-peer connections between all these different machines. The access control policies are fantastic, so you can get really granular in how you get all this set up. Not only with remote connections for accessing services, but that kind of peer-to-peer, for example, the Proxmox backup server thing that we got set up. So with all that, I do hope you enjoyed this video. There'll be links down below to the documentation so you can check that out, the actual website so you could sign up if you want to go ahead and play around with it. And with all that, I do hope you have an absolutely beautiful day, and goodbye.